People who knew murderers, when did you know something was off? I worked with someone that killed someone in self-defense. I didn't believe his story, which is probably why he served time for the incident. The story he told was that he was having sex with some girl and her husband came home and found them and immediately attacked him. He said he didn't want to fight him but killed him in self-defense. Some months after we hired him, we got word that he also had some child molestation in his criminal record. Once that word spread around, he disappeared. He had stolen some stuff from co-workers before he left. 2 weeks later he was robbed and killed outside a bar near work. The murderer I know was more of an acquaintance or casual friend. He lived down the hall from me and we hung out sometimes, but not like just the two of us. Still, we'd chill at each other's place regularly. I passed him one day in the stairwell and I said hi. He said hi back but called me by the wrong name. He was really distracted and kind of awkward. He didn't make eye contact and kept moving. I remember thinking maybe we don't know each other as well as I thought. Later he was playing Nintendo, yep, my N64, this was a while ago, with my roommate when I came home. He apologized and said his mind was elsewhere. A couple days later there are cops all over the building, interviewing people and searching his place. They'd found the guy's roommate with a bullet in the back of his head in an abandoned lot across town. The next day he confessed. Honestly, this girl I went to school with killed 2 kids she babysat and their mother. Before that, I would have told you she was one of the calmest, coolest people in our school. Would have never suspected her to do something like that. Had an employee on my work crew, acted strange and wouldn't listen to direction. Had goofy huge sideburns. Ended up going to jail for a short time. When he got out he shot his GF and her parents. Was friends with this one guy I met in HS. Long story short, he murdered another friend of mine's. When his name came up as a suspect at the time, it took me back to when me and him would go on about different murder cases and how he studied the Zodiac killer. We used to talk about how we would dispose of a body if we killed someone. I grew up on a lot of true crime because of my mother, so at the time it didn't raise any red flags. I just thought he liked true crime like me. I have a friend's friend who, you know the drill. And they didn't know. They had no idea. Normal day with coworkers. Where's Stephanie? She didn't show up for like 4 days straight. Doesn't matter, work, speak with coworkers. Suddenly police bursts in and arrest one of her coworker, another woman, who killed Stephanie over work disagreement, dismembered the body to hide it, and went back to work like nothing happened. She walked out handcuffed and was convicted. A friend of a friend at college used to hang around and smoke cigarettes with us. Never spoke much and that always made me feel uncomfortable. A few months back his grandfather tried to get him sectioned on a psychiatric ward. They rejected him, stating he wasn't bad enough. 2 weeks later he stabbed his grandmother to death and cut her face off in the middle of the street. Well, attempted murderer. He attacked his dad with a hammer. He was one of my best friends growing up. I couldn't see it, but my parents did. They always said something seemed off. I only began to see it in my early 20s. There was just something off behind his eyes. He was very impulsive and keen to take big risks. Last I heard he's in the state mental hospital indefinitely. Not my experience, but my grandmother's. She got pregnant at 15 by my grandfather and had to get married, 1960s. He was extremely abusive and my grandmother went to the police multiple times because she felt like he would wind up killing someone, but they just didn't take it seriously and ignored her. He later went on to strangle and beat a 14-year-old girl to death with a baseball bat just a couple years later. My bio dad ended up murdering my stepmom. Everyone in my family, my mom and 2 older brothers, definitely knew that something was up. He had severe anger issues and was very abusive. Some of the earlier memories I have are of him choking one of my brothers. He even almost choked my mom to death a couple of times. Obviously my mom was smart and divorced him as he didn't want to see him kill my brothers. Years later I come home from school and my mom and stepdad take us all to the side and tell us he shot our stepmom and was currently in jail. None of us were surprised. If anything, I was just so grateful my mom left him. It's so strange that I am directly related to a murderer. I knew a guy who killed his dad with a baseball bat, found not guilty. I met his dad when he came into the bar I worked at. He was a nightmare. He would squeeze people's hands when he shook them. He and his son were both boxers and the dad was really rough with him apparently. The day he was found not guilty he sent a text to someone at the bay saying, "I told you I would get off." I knew someone when I was in my early 20s in India. He was a dirtbag, but a fun guy under the right circumstances. I made sure to talk with him and be as pleasant as I could, while keeping him at an arm's distance. I moved away and then my mum tells me several years later that he and his 4 brothers were hired killers. Apparently 2 people got into a fight over a property and one of them hired these bunch of thugs. They waited for their victim to get home, get changed and relax, when they exploded an oil can in front of his house. When he came running out to see what was going on, they threw red chili powder in his face to blind him and chopped him to bits with large sickles. Apparently, the body was in multiple pieces at the funeral. I knew the victim as well. Guy had 2 daughters. I once met a guy at a train station and we got into a conversation over our mutual irrational fear of wasps. He casually told me how much of a sadist he was and casually explained that that's why he chose to be a butcher. He just went on and on about much he loved slicing their throats and listened to their screams. If there's ever a story about a murderous butcher near Cologne, I'll know exactly who it is. I went through primary and high school with a guy in the year below me who seemed a little distant. We lived near each other and caught the bus from the same stop. He was a bit of a bully, but it was something more. Like you could tell he wasn't a bully because he was hurting inside or because he felt threatened in some way. He was a bully because he did what he wanted to do and didn't realize that it hurt other people. Like the kind of kid who enjoyed pulling wings off flies. Not long after I left my hometown I heard that he had been charged with the murder of a 2-year-old. Apparently his girlfriend at the time left her daughter with him for an hour or so while she ran an errand. He couldn't deal with the toddler crying anymore, so he beat her. He caused severe internal bleeding and she died in hospital not long after. He would have been around 22 when he did it. He was sentenced to 36 years with a non-parole period of 27 years. There was a kid I went to high school with who always gave me the creeps. We had a lot of mutual friends, so we always ended up hanging out and it always made me feel really uncomfortable. Our senior year he got suspended for like a week because someone had found and turned in a hit list he had made. No one really took it too seriously. 3 years after we graduated he was in the news for murdering a man in our town that he barely knew. He told the police that he held the man's eyes open so he could watch his life leave his body. Coworker was just super narcissistic and was always talking about his childhood in Alaska. We worked in fast food and I was his boss, and one day he asked to go cut ice out of the freezer with a knife. A few years later I heard he killed someone. I still do not know what his motive was, but I definitely wouldn't put it past him. A guy from my school stabbed his grandmother when he was 18 years old. I knew something was off when I found him hiding in a scrub because apparently snippers were chasing him. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after he committed the murder. My neighbor and first sort of boyfriend ended up running over his girlfriend's mother after stealing her money for drugs. He was always a bit controlling and a lot out of control, but as soon as he started doing serious drugs around 17 was when he became a serious concern. He ran away from home and disappeared only for his mom to get a call that he has killed someone. I think it was ruled as manslaughter though, since there wasn't enough evidence that he intended to kill her. When he came looking for me because I was the only one that knew of the abandoned mine we both found when exploring as kids, It had been years since we had talked and he suddenly showed up looking for me. He killed his roommate because he was gay and made a pass at him. Dumped the body in the mine in Boulder County, Colorado. The first time I met him, he was a friend of my ex and something immediately seemed off about him. He was sneaky, always lying and cheating but not good at it cause he was dumb, total narcissist. I told my ex he should keep his distance, that the guy would only get him into some sh. Not only did he set my ex up to be robbed, he snitched on a bunch of other people, and finally snapped on someone in a fit of road rage and stabbed him. The guy he killed was fairly young and a good kid, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I hope that a hole rots in prison. Unfortunately, I know a few people who have committed murder. The one I knew was crazy from an early age was a guy we call Biggie in the neighborhood. He was always crazy. He legit thought he served in the deep jungles of Vietnam. He was like 2 when it ended, maybe 5 years ago. He went to some rehabilitation jail for killing a bunch of dogs and they let him out on a day pass. He didn't return and he beat a well-known gay activist to death at a bar that night. He's been released since then and he lives back at his parents' house 3 houses down. I know for a fact he will do this again.